Welcome back to Rank and File Sports, where we are grading every single NFL draft class based on three categories. First of all, we're going to grade based off of whether or not the team drafted the players that fit their needs for next season, as well as the overall talent that they got, just assessing the draft class as a whole. And then finally, the value. Is each player worth where they were drafted at? Were they a steal at that position, or did the team maybe reach a little bit and not get as good a value as they could have if they had traded the pick? And then after that, we're going to go ahead and give them an overall grade. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the video.
Hosts of the NFL draft, the Green Bay Packers had needs of a corner, an offensive tackle, wide receiver, edge rusher, and defensive tackle, and they did not let their fans down. For the first time in 23 years, they took a wide receiver in the first round with Matthew Golden out of Texas. And I, as a Bears fan, I hated it so much because that is a great pick for the Packers.
Yeah, great value to get him there. Second best receiver in the draft, according to ESPN. And I think that he's going to do very well in this Packers offense. Their second round pick, they went Anthony Belton also. This one, a little bit of a reach to take Belton in the late second round as an offensive tackle. But it's addressing a team need, and there were a few better tackles available, in my opinion, but obviously the Packers saw something that they liked in Anthony Belton.
After that, they went wide receiver again, so making up for a couple of years worth of not getting any wide receivers in the draft. This time they went with Savion Williams out of TCU. Go check out our TCU schedule preview. But he was a little bit of a reach, just ever so slightly. He was projected a little bit later in the third round, but at the end of the day, dressed in need, wasn't that big of a reach, and I think he actually has a lot of potential at the next level.
Yeah, and then to address their fourth need, that would be the edge rusher position, getting Barron Sorrell out of Texas. This one, it's a pretty solid pick, right around the value that, they should have got for him with the draft pick that they selected him with. And I think he's going to turn out to be a pretty good player, depth piece for the defensive line. Overall, this was a pretty good pick.
After that is pretty much the only questionable pick I have for the Packers this entire draft, and that's taking Colin Oliver, a linebacker from Oklahoma State. This was a pretty dramatic reach for the Packers, especially for a position that they didn't necessarily need. Um, but again, like Jonah was saying, there's got to be some reason that they were so willing to draft him this early on. So I'll leave it to them on that case, but from my perspective, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think this is the only blemish on an otherwise very good draft class as of this far.
Yeah, technically speaking, Warren Brinson could be considered a reach, but they got him late sixth round, and I don't think it's ever a bad pick to take a defensive player out of Georgia, especially along the defensive line. So again, bolstering the depth on the lines, and I think this is it's a pretty good pick overall.
I guess I spoke too soon because Micah Robinson, even though it does address a team need of a cornerback, he, at least on ESPN, had no position rank or overall rank. So that means he was projected to go undrafted. And I can't say I really blame them because he's played 4 years at Furman. He's not really known for their football program. They played 1 year at Tulane. Um, there's got to be a reason why, but I really don't see why the Packers would take this particular cornerback over someone else. I don't really know who was available at this time, but this was definitely a reach for a corner that no one was high on in the slightest.
Yeah, and then to close out the draft, they went with John Williams, offensive tackle out of Cincinnati. Again, really just adding on to that depth on the O-line. So, not a bad pick. It's the end of the draft, so anybody could go anywhere at that point. As far as addressing team needs go, they get an A. They hit all five of them. corner, tackle, wide receiver, edge, defensive tackle. Every single one of them met. And we didn't give him an A plus just because the corner was a bit of a reach. They probably could have gotten somebody a little bit better, but it's still going to be an A overall for addressing team needs. Talent wise, they're going to get a B. Uh, Anthony Belton, Savion Williams, little bit of reaches. Matthew Golden, I think, was a great pick though. So they have some really solid players, but not necessarily anything worthy of getting a, like an A as far as meeting their team needs go. While they met all of the needs, they didn't do it with the best players available at the time that they were able to draft, which is why they're going to get a B plus for value. Again, Golden, great value pick, but Belton and Williams using your second and third rounders or round picks to end up reaching, not a great look. But overall, they're going to get an A minus for this draft just because they met every team need. They got solid guys for those, but in the end, they're probably going to end up being depth players.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Packers fans don't care because they drafted Matthew Golden in the first round. That was probably all they needed. They could have drafted punters and kickers for the rest of the draft, and I think the Packers fans would still be happy. At the end of the day, I do think that even though they reached on some guys, my guess is they still pan out. There has to be reasons for it. The only one that I really don't know what's going to happen is that Micah Robinson pick, who they needed for their cornerback need. So we'll keep an eye on him there. But overall, if I was a Packers fan, thank God I'm not. If I was a Packers fan, I'd be pretty happy with this draft class.
Yeah, overall, again, it's going to be an A minus. Pretty solid draft class overall for Green Bay. So, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.